Hello, my name is Kaylee Bennett, and I am a 2020 graduate of Stetson University College of Law. I also recently served as a member of the Equal Justice Works National Advisory Committee, and I'm a practicing public interest attorney in Central Florida. We are here today in another installment of the My Impact Alumni Series, this time with Max Tipping, a 2015 Equal Justice Works Fellow. We're here today to talk about how an Equal Justice Work Fellowship launched Max's career and to hopefully inspire law students to follow their passion for public service and equal justice. Thank you, Max, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start from the beginning. Did you always want to be a lawyer, and what compelled you to pursue a career in public service?
No, I didn't always want to be a lawyer. I think it wasn't until maybe later in college that I started working on issues around housing and homelessness. And that's kind of when I started to piece together that these were, bigger structural issues. And that, I kind of believed at the time, as I guess I still believe, that lawyers are well placed to kind of address some of those and impact those structural issues. And also just seeing that lawyers are well placed to be able to make sure that everyone's individual rights, basic rights are respected regardless of your housing status or economic status. And I wanted to be able to do that.
That's great. So how did you find out about Equal Justice Works, and how did you get started on designing your own fellowship?
Let's see. So I found out a bit about Equal Justice Works pretty early on into law school. I started law school with a public interest focus. So I think I was looking for opportunities, and I found Equal Justice Works pretty early on. In terms of designing my own project, so I think I interned with the legal clinic my 2L year, the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless, where I ended up doing my project. But I think we started talking about it pretty early on, and kind of just having initial collaboration meetings on what it could be, and we kind of co-designed it and built it.
Can you talk about kind of what some of your main responsibilities were while you were a fellow there, and what you worked on the most?
Sure. So my project was focused on the rapid rehousing program in Washington, D.C., which is a program for families who were experiencing homelessness, and it kind of provided temporary housing. And so the kind of main focus of the work was trying to make sure that families in that program were actually able to keep their housing and didn't cycle back into homelessness again. And so that involved both, a ton of legal advice to lots of different folks, but also, direct representation in administrative hearings in a couple of different venues, a couple of appellate cases, to try to make sure that, folks wouldn't end up losing their housing and experiencing homelessness again. So that was the key part of the work. But the then kind of besides the individual representation, there was also kind of larger policy advocacy work around highlighting where rapid rehousing was failing folks and how it was setting some folks up for continued housing instability, and homelessness, and trying to make some of those bigger changes to the program such that we wouldn't have to do as many of the individual cases, and folks would actually be stable and safe.
That's great. Do you have any highlights that stick out now in your brain, even a few years later?
There was a couple of families in particular where it was just so clear that they could not be terminated from this program. This is something that they needed more support, and they were still getting cut off, and would have just been on their own, and would have been far worse off than where they'd even started out. And so being able to stand up with those folks and help to protect them and make sure that they were going to be okay, and successfully being able to get them into stable housing where they and their children were going to be able to count on it and rely on it and know that they would be okay. That definitely stands out as the main highlight. I think the other the other kind of big project that I worked on was we ended up writing a report on rapid rehousing that got a fair bit of media attention and local government attention, and kind of managed to at least shift the narrative and kind of change the conversation around what rapid rehousing was and what it wasn't. Starting out it was this kind of, everybody in all the kind of decision makers viewed this as like the answer to all family homelessness in DC. And I think by the end, we at least had succeeded in showing, hey, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And there's actually a lot of folks who are ending up in a worse position because of the way this program is being operated.
Do you have any tips at all that you can share with candidates who are thinking about designing their own project and how they could maybe approach organizations in doing that and how to do it the right way?
I would say just you can't always do this, but the earlier the better is really the answer for all of that. I think it's, especially if you're able to intern ahead of time with an organization that you think you might want to build a project with, that's really as good as it gets, because it's commitment from an organization too, and they want to know who you are before they sign on to supporting your project and trying to build you up. And so starting early, internship if possible, and then just starting early in general too. Don't start thinking about it the week before the applications. It takes a long time to put the application together, so I would just say earlier the better.
Right. Did you, while you were a fellow, get a chance to collaborate with other fellows? And did you find that you were able to leverage the expertise and the connections that you made with these other fellows during the fellowship?
So I didn't end up really collaborating with too many current Equal Justice Works fellows, but I worked with a good number of former Equal Justice Works fellows, which kind of still falls into that kind of networking benefit of it. Including my supervisor at the Legal Clinic for the Homeless was a former Equal Justice Works fellow, which was great both for just in general, but also she had the expertise of like how to make a fellowship project work, and how to adjust and build it when you come up with all these lovely plans and then you put them into action, and the real world is messy and gets involved in. I don't know, just it's helpful to have some of those other folks know how to overcome those obstacles and kind of adjust and keep going.
Right. It's great that you had that support to kind of navigate the process from someone who had done it before. I want to talk to you a little bit about your post-fellowship path. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so right now I am the policy director at a nonprofit called Community Spring, based out of Gainesville, Florida. Also the co-founder. So it's something that my partner and I, have stood up and built and launched in the last, I guess, for about a year and a half in right now.
That's awesome. Can you tell me more about the work of Community Spring and your mission, and a little bit about the direct job creation model that it's based on?
Yeah, definitely. So our mission has kind of two parts to it. So we aim to both dismantle structural poverty and also spur economic mobility at a grassroots level. And so kind of the two main pillars that we have for that are income and power, are how we think about it. So what we do essentially is we hire on folks who have been impacted by poverty for paid fellowship positions, where they design and build a campaign as a team to address whatever kind of big structural issue they think drives poverty in their community. And that's a bit of a mouthful. So just as an example, our last class of fellows had all been impacted by the justice system, and they faced barriers as a result of that, whether that was finding employment, or finding housing, or finding just the kind of general sense of exclusion and the kind of like emotional burden that comes with that. And so that they kind of honed in on that as what they wanted to work on, and so together we built a campaign to address that in our community. And so among other things, they designed and launched a peer support network for folks who are coming out of incarceration, where they could offer practical and emotional support as peers who had been in the same position. We also advocated for a local ordinance that would require fair chance employment. But basically the idea, commonly referred to as ban the box. So taking the questions off job applications around do you have a criminal record, and actually only asking those questions when they're relevant, making sure that basically employers are giving folks a reasonable chance to get the job and actually be considered for the job, and not just, looking at one mistake that somebody made 15 years ago, when they were 18, and having that be the one defining thing, but actually having it be a little bit more open, a little more fair. So those are just a couple of the things that we built out in that campaign. And right now we're in the process of hiring on our next fellowship class, and they will pick another kind of big picture issue, and we'll build another campaign together where they'll be working towards making their community a more just and fair place.
That's really great. It sounds like you're doing some really impressive work there. What lessons have you learned in starting a nonprofit that might be helpful to share with lawyers and law students interested in following the same career path and starting their own nonprofit one day?
So I would say, a couple things. I would say, if possible, find a partner that you can work with on this, somebody you can trust and rely on. Speaking for myself, it would have been difficult, if not impossible, to do on my own. I mean, just having somebody who you can bounce ideas off of, that you can, that can pull you through the difficult times, I think is really important. And also, I think maybe it's just me, but as a lawyer, I think you tend to be analytical, which I think for this kind of, in this kind of position can bleed into over analytical, which can lead to like self-doubt and not feeling like it, just not feeling like it makes sense. And I think that there's, to take the leap into starting your own organization takes a lot of faith, and kind of just it's a lot of risk. And so you have to have the ability to kind of just push through that, and whether that's another person or just finding your own way to to not just turn back or to not doubt yourself, but just to keep moving forward. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's terribly helpful, but that's what I'd say.
It makes sense. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much, Max, for taking time to speak with me today about your experience as an Equal Justice Works Fellow and about your career in public service. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy to do it.